Welcome to Sanford Speaks, the podcast that provides valuable insights and information to help parents and students navigate the world of education. Today's host is Sanford Communications Director and IT Director, Cheryl Fleming. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Sanford Speaks. Today, we continue our podcast series on living, learning, and teaching during the pandemic. Our returning guests are Sanford School's 3 counselors who will be talking with us today about helping adults manage stress during COVID-19. They've been here several times before, but because we have folks who are new, I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves again. Let's start with you, Sarah, and work our way from upper school counselor down to lower school counselor.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. So I am Sarah Satinsky. I'm the upper school counselor and learning services coordinator. This is my 5th year at Sanford School. And before working here, I was in private practice as a therapist and worked in a couple of other independent schools as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Greger. I'm the middle school counselor and learning services coordinator. This is my 2nd year at Sanford. And before this, I was in child psychology research for about 6 or 7 years. And so I'm happy to be working in the independent school field now.
And I am Sky Rashkin, the lower school counselor. And like Courtney, this is my 2nd year at Sanford. I have been an educator for a number of years in a variety of different settings as a lower school teacher, as well as an admissions person in local independent schools, as well as working at the local children's museum nearby. So a variety of different things that have led me right here to Sanford.
Well, thank you to all 3 of you for being here. Again, as I've said, you've been with us several times, and I know the last 2 podcasts we talked about helping children from preschool up through 12th grade manage stress during the pandemic. Today, we turn our attention to adults. And I guess the first question that comes to mind for me is, you talk to a lot of people, you talk to teachers, other adults, you read a lot, you're very well informed. Would you say that stress among the adult population has gone up since the pandemic has set in?
We're all going to shake our heads yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I think one thing to say is that stress is the reaction to pressure from a certain situation or a certain something that's going on. And we're in a state where that stress, that situation that we're all reacting to has become chronic and it hasn't gone away. It's maybe changed and evolved. But it would be impossible for stress to not have increased because we're all reacting to something that continues to be a significant part of our lives.
And I think just to go with that, we're each individual people. So how we handle that chronic stress is going to look really different across each person. And so, just within the middle school, seeing how our adults are responding to chronic stress and how that, also affects how they interact with other adults and with students and with their own family members. It looks different for each person, but it certainly has an impact.
And just by recent reports, it's about a quarter of adults who now they're saying have clinical levels of stress and anxiety, which of course is an uptick and one that just like our students and our young to older students, it is a worry and it is something that we are working to address every day.
So Sarah, you talked a little bit about what one of the causes of stress is. What are some of the other things that can bring on stress? What are some of the other triggers?
I think any change in the day-to-day way you approach life or operate is a potential source for stress. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. Certainly things can change in our lives and they feel good and they help us navigate things more easily. But generally, if there's anything that changes or happens or we experience that's different than what we're used to, it's going to trigger some sort of reaction. And it depends, like what Courtney said, for each person that might be something different and they may respond to it differently. But changes in what we're used to is hard. Humans evolved to be able to predict patterns and rely on certain things. And when uncertainty is common, it can feel stressful.
The only thing that I'll add to that is I think how we, how it's manifested, or like when we're dealing with chronic stress, if we're not, I think of even, just, it might be the same thing as for kids as it may be for adults, in the sense of acknowledging our feelings and what's happening internally for us. And so if we're, day after day feeling this chronic stress and it's piling on and we're not acknowledging it in a like explicit way, and we're kind of, I guess the go-to term is bottling it up. And we have that bottling effect, going on day after day, and we're not addressing it. Then when a trigger does go off or something happens to set it off, it really can be it feels very destabilizing. So maybe it could be anything, and it could be something very, very little, like, making breakfast in the morning, to, for a student, it might be like taking a test. But if we aren't addressing our feelings and talking about what is going on for us during that time of chronic stress, it can really, pile up, and then the triggers can set us off.
Just one thing to kind of jump off something that Sarah said, that idea that, we like our patterns, right? We like to know what normal is for us. And that's not where we are, right? We're not living in that same place. That uncertainty is so great. And I think even just that loss, right? Just those traditions, those milestones, weddings, graduations, et cetera, all those things that we can't quite do the same way. All of that just creates this angst that we have. And it does manifest itself in so many different ways, some of which really take us by surprise, I think. I know personally, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, my shoulders are tight. I have it's like, what's happening? It's like, oh, okay, you really need to manage that level of stress. And but it can creep up on you, that's for sure.
So is it possible for somebody to be stressed and not know they're stressed?
Yeah, I think there's this idea of you start to habituate to and normalize around what is your experience. And so the longer you experience something a certain way and you start to know that as your normal experience, you may not realize that you're closer to the barely surviving stage as opposed to the thriving. And so different physical things, maybe harder to sleep at night, intrusive thoughts coming up. You may say, oh, that's just normal. That's just what it's like. It's always hard to sleep. I'm always thinking about things. My worry state is just baseline high, and not realizing that there's actually a different way to be. There's also even more concerning ways to be, but it can be common to not realize where you're at on that scale.
It sounds kind of silly, but even just, for a parent, if your children are your world, right? And so taking a moment to acknowledge that you're in the survival mode. Are you addressing that you feel like, yes, we're in a huge time of uncertainty and chronic stress and whatnot, but have you taken the time for yourself to acknowledge that this is a survival mode experience? And like Sarah said, how your actions and feelings and thoughts have changed pretty permanently, maybe for the past year. And what does that look like for you every day?
So how can stress impact work life? And I guess, going back to the point that all of you have raised, that everybody is just so different. Every individual situation can be different. But what are some of the things that can take place in the workplace that folks should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I think if you're just generally feeling overwhelmed, right? Like everything just seems to be that kind of idea of piling on. And you find that it's like, oh my gosh, one more thing. Like I can't do one more thing, can't add one more thing to my plate. Just that sense of being overwhelmed or even that feeling of defeat, like I can't do it, right? Like those negative thoughts, that negative thinking, just feeling not as motivated, maybe, maybe it's not motivating you. Your work is not motivating you in the same way it was before because it seems harder. I know personally, I have a harder time concentrating, right? I kind of flit from thing to thing. It just feels like, can I ever finish a task, right? And then there seem to be tasks kind of added on, but it can have a really big impact on our work lives. And we have to really try to keep that in check. And if we have good, safe people around that we can talk to, that's so incredibly helpful. And they can help us kind of check ourselves, and we can help check them. So I think having a friend, having someone that you can really have those conversations with in your work life experience can be really, really helpful.
I think it's also important to acknowledge that because of the way many of us are operating now, whether it's in person or not, we're relying a lot more on technology, and many adults are working from home exclusively. And so in the past, where you might have been able to catch someone in the hall or swing by someone's classroom or office easily, now there's that added piece of either you're staying distant from them or you're at home totally isolated. And so instead of a quick question, which might take 5 minutes on your way to get coffee, you have to sit down, think about the email you want to write, compose the email, send it, wait for the response. Once they get the response, decide how you're going to react. So these short interactions, one, now take longer, and two, require a higher cognitive load, a mental load of being able to just do these minor tasks. And so then having the same amount of work can feel like much more work because the way in which we do our work has shifted.
The only thing that I'll add to that is then if you are, like Sarah's saying, like feeling like you have more work because of how things are going through the school, through your work day, and maybe you're not acknowledging the stress and feelings of being overwhelmed during the work day, it may then, come out and bleed into how you're behaving and feeling and thinking at home. So just also recognizing if, work feels okay, or even just, you're feeling productive, but maybe your home life has changed in some certain way, that it's important to notice that there might be differences in how you're thinking, feeling, and behaving at work versus at home.
And for those people who are at home all the time, I think about myself. I've been fortunate in so much as our workplace has been open, at least since September. So being able to get out and have some interaction with folks in a safe manner has been great. But there are some people who really don't have that opportunity, whether they're working at home or because they don't work outside of the home, and home has plenty of work. I totally get that. But would you say that stress would impact them differently, or could it impact them differently? And are there things they should think about if they are totally isolated?
Yeah, I think that sense of Groundhog Day all over again, that's very real. I think for many of us, even those of us who do get to go to a workplace every day. So I think that's really important to kind of keep in check for sure. And I think my only words of wisdom there would be, again, it's always work-life balance, and you almost have to put blinders on and kind of separate yourself to some extent so it doesn't all bleed into, or can just bleed into so much of your life. Turning it off is so important. And I think just even if it's not going anywhere, except for maybe stepping outside of your house to take a couple deep breaths or to take a short walk, something just to kind of change the scene, even if it's just for a few minutes, I think it can have a huge impact. I know for me in the last spring, I had to do that multiple times a day because it got to be too much tech, too much time, feeling like I was doing the same thing over and over.
Speaking of doing the same thing over and over, it's funny because you said that as something that's challenging to be stuck with, and yet we thrive on routine.
We do.
So finding a routine that feels good. So it's not going to feel monotonous, but that, like Sky said, I need to get outside every morning. Maybe you really like spontaneity and creativity, so you're not scheduling yourself each half hour of an activity, but at least an hour or two during the day, it's spontaneous time, scheduled spontaneity, if you will, to give yourself that opportunity to find routine and build into your day things that you're going to need to feel better and make the day more manageable.
Well, throughout the pandemic, I would say it's difficult to totally avoid stress. I think all of us, as you were saying, and everybody being so different, we're all going to feel it in some way, shape, or form. But are there any particular strategies you could recommend for helping to cope with it, manage it, and hopefully reduce stress?
This isn't a strategy, but I'm going to start off by saying something important to do is acknowledge that our goal in managing stress, or specifically anxiety, which is a little bit different, is not to make those feelings completely go away, but rather to acknowledge them and then be able to handle and react to them in a way that is either healthier or more manageable, or feels like it's mitigating some of the pressure you feel from that initial feeling. And so I think maybe this strategy is here. Some people may think I need to just block it out, get rid of that feeling, that thought. And this, I think the first strategy would be to acknowledge and accept the fact that it's there. And then, okay, so how are you going to react to that in a way that feels good? And maybe prevent yourself from reacting in a way that brings you farther down.
With that, I'll say, yeah, it goes hand in hand with acknowledgement, is like identifying what is, even if it's hard to acknowledge the feelings or even identify what that feeling is, identifying what like may set you off per se, quote unquote, or, make you feel upset, and considering the situations that like push your buttons, or recognizing what happens physically for you in those moments. Like maybe you're tensing your muscles, or you're, yelling. There might be a whole host of things that are happening physically. But at first identifying like what is setting me off and what am I feeling, is certainly a good first step.
And I think to avoid some of those feelings of being overwhelmed or being super stressed. Again, we've shared this before, but I think it's always such a good reminder, just keeping your regular schedule as much as you can, whatever that looks like for you, eating well, getting enough sleep, exercise. It sounds like the same old thing, but it is incredibly important. And I don't think it can be overstated just to do those simple things, which aren't easy necessarily. It sounds easy, but it's not easy to not watch one more show or to not eat that second piece of cake or whatever it is, but you need that balance, and we need it so much right now.
I also like the idea in terms of strategies of rebranding some of the things you already have to do. So a lot of people may say, I don't have time to go to a 1-hour yoga practice. I don't have time to add in X, Y, or Z. Well, you have to shower a couple times a week at least. Get a soap that smells really, really good that you love, so that when you're showering, you're able to indulge in that. You have to eat dinner. Can you eat dinner on the floor in the living room, or put a tent up and make it a camping night with the family? You have to tuck your kids in for bed. Can, as part of your tuck-in routine, play a 5-minute breathing mindfulness passage. It's good for the kids, but you probably could do it with them as part of that bedtime routine. So finding ways to squeeze in little practices that you're already having to do anyways, see if you can rebrand them.
Well, you all do a lot of wonderful things for the Sanford community. And one of those things is create parent programs and programs for students. And I'm thinking for those folks out there who don't have, counselors or others who can facilitate some of those things, what helpful resources are available to people who might be looking for some help with managing stress?
Mm-hmm. Well, resilience relies on relationships. The most resilient people are ones who not only feel like they can call someone, they can list someone they could call in a time of need, but also they know, hey, if this person were struggling, I bet they would call me. And so to figure out who those people are in your life, and starting with those relationships as a place to build some strength.
I think it's incredibly important to, if you know that your stress is really high or out of control, to get some supports, like Sarah was saying, from a friend. If it's something that you're not ready to share with someone that is close to you in those ways, or you think that you really need a healthcare professional, I would highly recommend, and certainly we have great resources for mental health practitioners in the area. But I think that realizing, what you need, trying to figure out what you need, and getting some of those supports is really, really important.
The only thing that I'll add is just that, we're in a time of crisis, and, we need connection. And so it takes all of us working together as a community to kind of work through this together. And so just kind of combining both Sarah and Skye's answers, leaning on the friendships, the existing friendships that you have right now, the people that, you feel that you can trust the most. Also, maybe leaning on other parents of the students that your children are friends with, connecting with other student parents, connecting with your counselors, your students' teachers, connecting with, people that maybe in your gym class or whatever is going on, kind of reaching out for extra resources through the people that you feel most connected with, I think is, definitely the go-to move right now.
Well, I think just last thing is you're not alone, right? Many of us are really feeling it. I mean, most of us are feeling this level of stress these days. It does feel different. And so there are supports out there. And I think just putting yourself out there, I mean, taking that first step is pretty huge.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I hate to put you on the spot, but usually when I close out these podcasts, regardless of who's here, I say, if there's one piece of advice or a couple of pieces of advice as people disconnect from this program, what would you tell them to remember?
I'll go first this time. You are enough. You're doing a great job. Nobody knows how to handle this. And you are taking care of yourself and your family. And there is no right way to do that. It takes a village. And so we're here for you. You're not alone. And you're doing everything that you can.
And I'll just say that nothing is forever. And so remembering that, especially if you're going through a time that feels particularly tough, it will pass. And there are things that you can do to help make that time that you're navigating it a little bit easier.
And I think I would just say, again, getting that emotional support that you need, realizing you need it, acknowledging what those feelings are, and reaching out, connecting, and getting support is just it's just necessary. And I know it's hard to do, but there are people that are there for you.
Courtney, Sarah, and Sky, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy schedules to once again join us for Sanford Speaks. I think the advice you give helps many people, and we are very fortunate to have you in the Sanford community and to share with our broader community. Thank you so much again for being here, and we hope you'll come back again soon.